Our next speaker is going to speak about culture in high-performing teams. His name is Subhayu Ghosh. Subhayu is the Vice President of Product and Growth at Tier Mobility, where he is responsible for leading the product, marketing, customer loyalty, CRM, and revenue management teams. He wears a lot of hats. With more than 2 decades of experience leading cross-functional teams, he has a track record of delivering innovative solutions that drive product-led growth and companies for like Amazon and Emirates Airlines, as well as scale-ups like Tier Mobility. As a leader, he is skilled in helping diverse teams to solve real-life problems, innovative and experiment at scale to achieve competitive advantage and drive business growth. His mission is lifelong learning, and he's always looking for new opportunities to learn and to grow as a product leader. Shub, I hope that you can also share with us all this lifelong learning that you have. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Hey. Hello, Budapest. So yeah, I have the toughest spot, I'm told. Yeah, after lunch, kind of. Okay, so I think you're in safe hands. As I say, they put the best speaker after lunch. Okay, so today I'll be talking about decoding culture in high-performing teams. Right, that's the topic. Some background. I am known more to be a process person, right? More to get things done. I'm not much of a talker. Some people will, in fact, there are people I worked with in here, so they would kind of also relate. But I intentionally picked this topic to share some real life experiences with you, right? So that maybe there's some takeaway out there as in practical takeaway, right? Okay, let's hit it. So a little bit about me. So that's how I look on LinkedIn. Yeah. So incidentally, my full name is Subhayu Ghosh, known by Sub, and for others who can't pronounce my name, they would say, oh gosh, the number guy, right? So yeah, I have an obsession towards numbers, metrics, KPIs, getting things done. No talk without a mention to him. He is the reason I came into product management. I felt that this is a field that's worth it, right? Quite frankly, I came to make a career, not to fall in love with product management, but I thought this is a career I learn enough. But it's turned out to be a love affair. So yeah, I'll be sharing some of those there. Jack of all trades, moving towards a master of all. I've always been a big believer in being a generalist, right? And the part of the generalist is always, oh, you're not a master of anyone. But in product management trade, I think we all master one thing at a time and then move on as we experience to another, right? So that has been more or less my life. Yeah? Okay. Now, enough of me. As I said, when I first thought about this conference and what should I present, definitely culture came to my mind, but I'm presenting this for the first time. So I thought, okay, it's extremely hard for me, the number guy, to talk about culture. It's almost very romantic, you know, that mushy. So like, what is even culture? You know, you'll have 50,000 different definitions. So I wanted to be very pragmatic about a definition of culture. Why is it important? Why do we care? And then what is the makeup of a high-performing team? And what are the processes that effectively create a high-performing team? Yeah? Okay? Now, talking about the definition. So I know Brian Chesky has been, there's been a hate and love relationship with product management, correct? So I thought it's pretty apt to discuss this. So in his words, he says, culture is simply a shared way of doing something with passion, right? Okay. So the fact is that it is a shared way. I think that caught my attention, right? So it's nothing to do with romance. It's a shared way with passion, correct? So I'd really build upon these two for the rest of my talk, right? Now, there's this concept in leadership and communication. There's a framework known as the Johari's window. I don't know if you've anybody heard about Johari window. Yeah, I see some nods. Okay, cool. So it's a simple 2x2 metric, right? Where you have your first row as what others don't know, your second row as what others know, your first column, what I know, and your second column as what I don't know, correct? So there are 4 possibilities. The first one is your blind spots. I don't know something, others know something. Very dangerous area, isn't it? Yeah? Okay. No one likes blind spot, huh? Second one, unknown area. I also don't know, you also don't know, we really don't know. Very dangerous space. You know, anything can happen. The first date, maybe. Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Be careful, be careful. Then the third one is your hidden areas, which is known as the facade, which is quite corporate-ish. I know, I will not let others know. Yeah, because it's my secret, right? It's the thing to get the next promotion, right? Or I messed it up, you know what? Let's cover it up, right? And then the last one is your arena, the open area. Now, what does it mean? In the open area is the arena where you fight, right? And the thing is, if you look at it as a sport, that's a safe area, correct? I don't build enemies, I compete respectfully, I get the job done, and I'm out. That's how I would kind of define arena. We are all on the same page, right? So I wanted to use this framework and introduce it to you before I proceed, because there's a link to this, to culture, and I'll come to that, yeah? Okay. Now, when you look at product development stages, now you would say, how does culture, Johari's window, really get to the point? How does it relate to product, right? I was struggling with it in my early years. I'm like, culture? Agile. Build something. What culture, right? Let's, you know, let's get to the meat of things. So, this is your input. Based on some input, input goes into a process, right? The process yields some output. Output yields some outcome. Outcome yields a goal. I'll explain. So typically, your input would be your customer feedback, you know, and your research and stuff like that, correct? Based on that, you do something with it as a product leader with your tech teams. There's a process going on, right? You can call it agile, hyper agile, and so many other things. And then there's an output, which is your product, how it looks like. With me? Yeah? And then the most important thing is the output has to have some outcome. Oh, I released this feature, I got 10% more monthly active users. Make sense? Right? Now, many such outcomes together helps to achieve a common corporate goal, which is a business goal, right? And typically, we would probably work backwards from these, right? A goal is set. I define some outcomes I want to achieve. Based on that, I go to the input, and then I build something to get an output, right? Now, the relevance of culture here is interesting. You see, top out there, the goals and outcome are your whys, right? Why would you do something? Many a times as leaders, we fail to communicate, right? We think, oh, I want to achieve 10% more monthly reoccurring revenue. So, you know, I think we should do something. And as a leader, I would just tell, hey, team, do this. So there's a communication gap, no shared vision, right? And then there's a process failure out there. Sometimes we deliver products, and I know this probably most of you would be able to correlate. Sometimes we deliver products, it doesn't hit the outcome. Oh, I shipped a new feature. I thought the company is going to be rich. Nah, nothing happened, right? So there is always a break in the process in many a times. Now, sometimes as well, we go to develop completely new novel ideas, new features, etc., but we do not succeed. And the project is scrapped. After 1 or 2 months, we see that because of the code-based complexities or because of market conditions, we cannot really release a product. So at each stage, there are uncertainties. There is a lack of communication, and that is the importance, I believe, of culture, right? So how do we straighten out each step is important. How do we risk manage each step is super important. Now I'll come to the interesting part, is where I'll share with you some of my experiences of where me and the team have been in these areas, right? And I'll begin with the first one, in the blind spot area. So this is where customer and market awareness we completely didn't have. And I'll give you examples specifically of a scooter company. You can imagine the rest, right? So where we had, when I was there, we still had around 513 cities, right? And in each city, the fact is different. The customer pain point is different. So what you do, you rent a scooter, you start the scooter, you finish your ride, and that's it, correct? Now, what happened, let me give you 2 examples. In London, the customers needed to do an ID verification, which is they needed a driver's license, click the picture, ID verification is done, then only you're allowed to start the scooter. But that's very typical of London. Now, against our competition, that feature, wasn't good enough, right? But it never hit our metrics because London is one city in 513, and those local nuanced never reached us. And as a global team, I would also argue sometimes we would ignore those local nuances. But you talk to anyone in London, oh, they don't know what they're doing. There's a blind spot. Paris, there was a huge parking problem. You know, in Paris, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a GPS issue, right? The GPS, there's a lot of drift. And there's a parking problem because the scooter, the phone doesn't identify that the scooter is in the right location, and the customers can't park too much. And that's a kind of across the board problem. So those are the blind spots that we had, and we didn't know until the local market started really becoming very loud, right? So that's a typical example. Could we do something about it? We tried. To a certain degree, I would say we were successful as well. Now, I'll give you another 2 examples on the unknown side. So this is the gut feeling. So our onboarding process was a lot dense. So there were around 32 interactions or steps that the customer needs to do to complete the onboarding, right? And we thought it was a brilliant idea to reduce it to 3 interactions. So from 32, going down to 3. And we thought definitely this will be the game changer, right? But we didn't know whether it will really be the game changer, whether we'll be able to increase our onboarding process, the time taken, or rather decrease the time taken to onboarding by at least maybe 30% or 40%. We didn't know, right? We needed to experiment. Now, in order to experiment, it took us a lot of time. Right? Why? Because your backend has to be ready, your database has to be ready, and then only you can experiment on the front end side, typically around 2 months, 1 month to release something, and that was our challenge, right? And then the very famous hippo dropping, right? Which is, in this instance, which was, oh, you know what? Make the call to action button bigger, right? I was clearly told on Slack by my CEO, just make it bigger. I said, okay. I'll make it bigger. But we really didn't know what outcome will that develop, or what outcome will that derive, right? So those are two more examples there. And in both cases, it was a failure. We couldn't do much. And then the transparency. So in one occasion, we were delayed. And why we were delayed? We rolled out a feature, bugs, rolled back, took some time, 15, 20 days. I think very familiar scenario probably, right? So rolled it back, 15, 20 days, fixed it, pushed it out, 1 month, gone, right? Now, in that process, it's very tempting, shh, don't say anything, don't say anything. And the stakeholders in the market, it's peak summer, they want those features, they want the bikes on the street, but it's not coming. So that was another issue as well. Now, let me, after having talked about some not so good incidences, let me talk about a good incident, right? So that's about trust. So this was a feature around group rides. So it basically means that 2 or more people can start a scooter ride, right? But it's only one person who needs an account. So one person can unlock 5 scooters. Make sense? So imagine your friends and you going together for a party, so on and so forth. So that was the first feature release. It was a big bang release, right? And in that, what are the things we did? So this is the story of a PM. I'll not name her. So what, nope. So what she did was, she started with these 4 areas, right? She started to think that, okay, what do I not know and what do others know? That means customer and market, right? So we build a RACI matrix of a stakeholder engagement plan. So we plotted out the stakeholder in each of the markets, and we made sure that we spoke to each of the marketplaces. In fact, she made sure that she spoke to each of the marketplaces. Hey, if we roll this out in Paris, what do you think? What are the issues? If we roll this out in London, city by city, what came out? In certain cities, this was a no-go because of regulatory reasons, right? In certain cities, they said it's an extremely bad idea. We have a high fraud rate, which is people use the service and don't pay, right? And now the fraud rate will be 5 times more. I'm not comfortable. So on and so forth. And what we then could derive, because of that engagement, what we could derive is which are the cities we will roll out, which are the cities we will not roll out. That was practical step 1. Step 2, so that is what I call as the market fit. Then the customer fit. Do we really have customers who want to, start group rides? Did some interviews in each of the locales, found out some insights, and put it into the development or into the feature release, let's say, right? So that's 1. 2 is about so essentially, what is basically happening here is you can see that we are trying to pull people from these areas into this area. Make sense? Right? That's the deal. So what I just described to you, what did she do? She basically coordinated with different markets, with customers, and brought them all to that same page, to the arena, right? Then comes the unknown. How did we deal with unknowns? There were so many unknowns, right? As few people mentioned, and if I go into the details, they were like, okay, will I ask 5 people to pay or only 1 person to pay? And there were different theories. Oh, I don't want to pay. I want to unlock the bike for my friend, but I don't want to pay for them, right? Or other theory is, why would you want 5 people to pay? Just tell 1 person to pay and let them settle the payment with their friends. We didn't know. We needed to experiment, right? Now, if each experiment takes 2 months, the release will happen next year, right? So the proper thing that we did is we had a framework of rapid experimentation. We understood that the bottleneck purely is that the whole development process of a normal or a standard feature is extremely clear. You have some database, you have backend, you have front end, rough, correct? We said, let's bypass everything, focus just on the front end, right? Now you might imagine, okay, if the customer presses something or does some interaction, how will the data be stored? Well, there are many options. Look at MailChimps, right? You don't need to use SQL databases. You can use, unless I'm speaking French here. Okay, so you don't need to use SQL databases, etc., or your standard method of development. You can use a very specific experimentation framework to fast forward things, right? So the only thing you do is fake door test, and you do it just in the front end without elaborating further, right? So we were very successful in rapid fake door testings to find out what is sticking, what is not sticking, right? Then comes the third part, which is your facade. How are we clear about what we are doing? So as I mentioned, one of few of the techniques she used was she provided stakeholders with a stakeholder engagement plan. She said, I will have open office hours every week, and eventually we rolled it out to bi-weekly sequences. If you have questions, feedback, come and drop in, number one. Concretely speaking, she also gave a confidence level that we will release this feature 70% confidence in June, 95% confidence in July. Simple techniques extremely creates a good transparency because there is unknowns, right? So these are some of the tips and tricks. Of course, she arranged meetings so that we are pushing out information. And here, since it's post-lunch, a learning from my CEO in 10 years before. So at that time, I was in the airline industry, and we were doing a training program on airline accidents. That's a big thing, correct? So if an airline accident happens, there's so many deaths. How do you manage that? And the CEO said one thing. So the whole discussion in the room was, how do we avoid press? Oh, the press will call. What do we do? How do we keep things under the carpet? And he said, from his experience, the first thing you do is to call up the press yourself and give them things you know. We know that flight number XYZ encountered an accident. It had 50 people. This is all that we know. We'll come back to you as soon as we know more. Standard press verbatim. But there's a reasoning behind it. And the psychology is, if you don't feed information, people will gossip. So you feed the information, you have them in your confidence, right? So that is very important as product leaders. We often don't communicate enough, I believe, and that's one of the things that I want to also talk about. So as I said, coming back, she arranged meetings, and there were periodic meetings, and everybody is, well engaged. Now, as I mentioned, it's all about communication, right? Which I already established. But then there is this last story on this same product development cycle, which is about autonomous team. How do you think then the team was empowered? In this instance, I'll give you a very powerful story, which really changed also my way of thinking. So be with me. So what happened, we released the group ride feature, right? And now some of you know that in certain cities, there is a tendency of fraud, right? People use the service and not pay. And there were concerns that, in certain cases, the fraud might increase to 5x, right? So we identified some cities, namely Lyon and other cities which had history, that, let's not release it there. We released, the first release was in Germany, right? Guess what? 70% fraud. And here is me, a new leader, my first release, 70% fraud, day one. So we earn 100, lose 70, take out the people cost, we are in EBITDA negative. And I'm like, what to do? Tremendous pressure, really, tremendous pressure. People were saying, stop it, don't release it, go back, this will not work out. And I'll be honest here, I gave up. I said, okay, nah, this will not make it. And I told her, don't do that. that day, she taught me a great lesson. She said, okay, super, fine. I said, listen, I got to answer the CEO why we are spending so much of money and losing so much of money every day. The risk threshold is increasing. I could wait for one, quite frankly, I waited for a week, but nothing was improving. She said, okay, let's do a deal. How much money are you willing to spend to give me a chance to understand whether this is a success or a failure? She flipped the situation. And then she said, will you give me $25,000 to make this either a success or failure? Is that where your limit is? Can you afford that budget? I said, yeah. I mean, I have 25K. I can justify. I said, fair. She brought out the data and said, as of today, we are down by almost 12K. So I will wait till the time we are down by 25K before we take any decision. So she boxed me up. I'm like, cool. I went back. I conveyed that decision to the CEO and every stakeholder. And guess what? The fraud rate started to drop. We never hit 25. This is the most successful product till date. Second year running. Had she not done that, I would never have come and have been able to share this with you, right? Why I'm sharing this with you is it's very easy to say, oh, culture is this, culture is that, but that day was a big lesson for me of what a culture is, what is empowerment, how to draw boundaries, right? So that's one important area that I wanted to discuss with you. So I would say culture is also about taking risks, empowering the team to take risks within a defined limit. Make sense? Okay. So here are some of the frameworks, or some of, not the frameworks, this is my 20 years of experience on one slide, right? So, which is how I bring people from where I don't know to I know, how I bring them from this bucket to that bucket. First, some very quick mechanisms. We have a big bets release, which is basically Q4 of every year, there's a spreadsheet, and we tell the markets, you know, the 513 cities, you give me what you want to see as a big bet next year. Correct? Very simple spreadsheet comes in. We know where the head of people are. Correct? We have our own ideas. We, through customer research, we know a few things. So we put all of that and prepare a very high-level roadmap for more or less a year, right? This also we released, and that's one. Then the intake process. So there's a Jira ticketing system. Anybody who has an idea can put something as an intake, and it comes to us and sits in our backlog. Why is it important to institutionalize? I have seen most of big ideas trouble product managers a lot, because it's unlimited Slacks, unlimited email, and it kind of gets very emotional. So it's better to keep it in a process. A lot of research, documentation, office hours. This is another unique thing that we did in Amazon. I also did in Tier, and now in Light. So what is office hours? Very simple. Every week, we have a 1-hour slot where the product team opens up a call. Anybody from markets, anybody from the company can jump in. If they have some concerns, some questions, some clarifications, they drop in. It's an open line of communication. What has happened when we did that? Fantastically, lot of market came in and said, you know what, in Paris, this is happening. In here, this is happening. I want you to action on it. That's your ears to the ground, right? So that's another good way. Regional center of excellence. So this was also in the Amazon days. So what we had is, we had regional champions in product teams. So they were kind of seconded to the region, and they would kind of also coordinate in calls and so many other things to bring back those voice of customers, right? And they would also conduct a lot of research around the regional stuff. And segment-based insight. This is very important in today's market, and this is something that's important because people think there's a lot of mistake, a lot of wrong thinking about competition. If I tell you, does Microsoft Word that's a document. That's a Word document, correct? It's a product. Does it compete with, let's say, a supermarket? You would say no, right? I would say yes, it does. Because the point is, customers have very limited money every month. And they are making that choice whether this month will I continue my Word subscription or will I buy some more vegetables from the market. Correct? So at some point, every product competes with each other. So you need to be very careful that your product appeals to which segment, right? And you need to make a very few people, quoting Sam Altman, make a very few people extremely happy, and then move on to a few more people. If you try to please everybody, it's difficult. So segment-based insights, data, super important, right? And you should very clearly know, my product is for Tom, not for someone else, right? Okay, rapid experimentation. I've already given away a lot of things there, but to keep it short, fight with IT security. That not every experiment needs to follow that all security thresholds, all of your back-end practices, etc. Hacks, 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 and hacks. Only front-end, right? So that's the other part on the rapid experimentation. If my rule of thumb, if any experiment takes more than 3 days, don't do it. Useless, because you lost time, right? And then business reviews, monthly business reviews, weekly business reviews with stakeholder, basically trying to bring them from here and here to that corner, right? So that's important. Communications about different initiatives, lunch and learn. Lunch and learn is what? It's the opposite of office hour. It is, I open up and I talk. I don't listen much. Yeah. We love to do that, no? Okay. And then, most important, take risks. Take risks. Here, I would like to quote the Louis Vuitton CEO. So there was an interview where the Louis Vuitton CEO, he was very strongly opinionated about how the product will look like. Rightfully so, right? It's a successful product. He had a lot of input. He hired a champion designer, chief design officer from the fashion industry. I'm not naming them. And I watched his interview where the journalist asked him, well, you have so much, Louis Vuitton is all about you. You have so much input into the brand. How did you share powers with your chief design officer? Make sense? This person is coming, he's a big shot in the fashion industry. If he doesn't innovate, he will run away. And you are the most opinionated person the world knows about. So how does that relationship go? He said one thing which has stuck here forever. He said, it's simple. I sorted in 5 seconds. You know how? He said that when I first met him in my office, day 1, I said, well, welcome. Welcome to the team. I'm so proud that you are here and you will take this places forward. And I gave him, there was a round table. I gave him one A4 size blank page on the table and a pen. And he said, this is your page. This is your story. You paint it the way you want. But it is my job to make sure you don't write on the table. You write on the paper. Yeah? What that meant, he de-risked innovation. He put boundaries to the innovation, saying, innovate, but this is your limit. So if you want to understand fail fast, why fail fast? Basically, it means fail cheap, right? So the cost of learning should be cheap. So he gave that boundary. So there is innovation. And to put it into context, it's that 25,000 story. That was where she gave me a boundary and I was comfortable. Oh, 25 is a limit, I can take a risk, right? So those are those small conversations where you draw that in your day-to-day life. If you draw that, then that's good. Limit your risks, but do take risks. Otherwise, you're not innovating. It's a bad proposition. That's it. I'll finish with Brian Chesky, says your culture is your program. So it's not a romance, it's your program. It's an operating system that powers your organization. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Shub. Going up, so I'm not speaking in front of the speakers. I learned my lesson. Thank you so much. We have a few questions. First one is, why did the fraud stop? Why did the fraud stop?
I'm almost looking at someone. Okay, so I'll answer. The fraud stopped because the fraud started because the early adopters are those teenagers who don't want to pay. They know the hacks, and they do that. But in the later periods, we had the real customers come in. So fraud never stopped. The percentage of fraud reduced, if it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Victor. At what level do you typically run the office hours? Is it the product division, a single product group, or somewhere in between?
Okay, so the office hours was meant to listen, right? So I'm not talking about the lunch and learn. I don't know who asked this question. If you want to speak up, you can. But it's not about lunch and learn. It was about listening. So anybody who comes and drops in, and it was wide variety of conversation. Somebody would say, in my city, this is the problem. I just wanted to let you know. Somebody said, I have a big idea. I want to let you know. And we would only listen. That was the office hours. If this is related to lunch and learn was very focused on a few initiatives. Yes. Yeah. So I'll be honest. It is most of the time the product managers, but we had a rota. So it is this PM there, and then we would document the learning. But we had the manning of a rota, basically.
I hope the question is answered. Yes? Yes. Okay, great. How is it possible to fraud? Oh, that's a
I'm not sharing that.
Someone is being tricky
I'm
here,
not sharing that, but it's extremely possible, right? So, yeah, I don't know, like if I should go into this. But okay, I mean, let's say virtual cards, PayPal, so many ways.
Come on, guys. It's a computer. If there is digits, there is a way. All right. How can we learn from big companies if they don't show the real inside data?
Interesting question. I don't know who asked, but I have worked in Amazon, I've worked in Emirates Airlines. What I've seen is the data is accessible internally at least, unless I'm mistaken.
It's anonymous, so I don't know.
Okay, so if the question is around, oh, how can I learn being an external product leader from these companies? Well, that's a little bit of my cynical side. I have always believed, product is about doing things, right? It's not about talking or listening. It's the more you do, the more you learn. I mean, I've always believed in that, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. How can we not get, oh my God, how can we not get traumatized from big bad decisions?
Oh, so the most important thing is when you know that survival is hinged on taking risks, you should incentivize. I actually forgot, I thought I would mention, good that you asked this question, whoever, thanks for asking this. So if you incentivize taking risks, people will take more risks. So what we did, one of our KPIs in the product team is to conduct at least 30 experiments a year. So you see how we flipped. People talk about success, right? We flipped and said, you conduct 30, I don't care. Don't talk about success or failure. If you conduct 30, you're success. Now we know if every PM conducts 30, they are intelligent people, something will stick, right? But another thing from Amazon again, we had a solid lessons learned document. So we would document what we learned and we don't repeat the same mistakes. But yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. The 25,000 story starts after the fraud. What are the best ways to set the boundaries and empower risk-taking from the beginning?
Yeah, so you're always richer in hindsight, right? I don't have a very strict answer. I'm not a person of frameworks. I believe all frameworks are not deep enough, so it's more you do work, you learn, but it's hard for me to say. It's really hard. I mean, I don't know if somebody has some views here, but I would say in this instance, I can talk about this instance. I knew my budget, right? So I knew I can spend 25K on, I had budgets of consultants. You know, if you're a budget center holder, cost center holder, you know you have consultant budget, you have this budget, that budget. I knew I could sneak in that money, so I took that risk. So it's basically about probably budgets.
Shub, thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming here today, for sharing us your insights. Before we say goodbye, I have two gifts for you. One is a picture.
Wow, thank you.
Yes. And
Looks nerdy.
Hungarian tea.
Oh, wow,
being
thank
an
you so
amazing
much.
Speaker. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Let's
Cheers.
join hands for Subhayu Ghosh.